All right, Christine, thank you so much for doing this. Now, we have a lot to talk about when it comes to Caitlin Clark, the WNBA, women's sports in general. But I want to start with sort of a random topic that I think speaks to the WNBA, where they're at today and potentially will be in the future. And that's DeJounte Carrington. So, anyone that has been following your story with the book, Caitlin Clark, the WNBA over the last at least 2 years, probably remembers last year where there was an incident on the court. Caitlin Clark got poked in the eye, but more importantly, this went sort of viral all over social media, like everything has with Caitlin Clark over the last number of years. And people were criticizing Carrington for potentially doing it on purpose. And you asked her a question, I think at the next media availability, where you essentially gave her the floor to confirm, deny, give her side of the story. And to me, I don't want to say it was a favor, but it was like sort of the appropriate thing to do, right? It was like, hey, I'm going to ask you a really pointed question and I'm going to give you the opportunity to clear it up. A lot of people are claiming you did this on purpose. And I think traditionally, this question wouldn't have phased a male athlete. No one would have asked another question. But when it came to her, it sort of created an entire new firestorm off of the incident, right? The Players Association came after you personally and said that it was, a bunch of different things. I just want to hear from you, like, what did that incident tell you about where the NBA is or the WNBA is and sort of like how much further they have to go?
Yeah, Joe, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me. And it certainly told me that the WNBA was completely unprepared for national scrutiny and what real journalism, sports journalism is at a high level. Something that I've been very fortunate and lucky to be able to be at that level with the Miami Herald, the Washington Post, USA Today, my various TV work. And of course, I take that very seriously and I continue to want to practice that kind of journalism. I say practice isn't practice, as opposed to actually practicing, but actually, doing that kind of journalism. And I have for over 40 years. And so for me, what I thought was absolutely the right way to go, I didn't give it a second thought. And to this day, I don't give it a second thought, is when you've got a national controversy brewing and in social media, which of course is where so many of those WNBA stories exist, when you have millions of people tweeting out and posting and everything about DeJounte Carrington did it on purpose, look at her fingers, they're all, it's like a Zapruder film of, people looking, at her fingers and their whatever is going on. There is only one thing a journalist should do at that moment. When you get an opportunity to talk to that athlete who's in the midst of that firestorm, you ask them specifically about the issue, to your point a moment ago when you asked the question, specifically about it, as specific as that question can be, so that they get a chance to answer it, clear the air, hit it out of the park, say no comment, whatever they want to do, they're in control. And you said that the idea of athletes, most pro athletes I've dealt with, and I've been, again, very fortunate to, cover the NFL for years and the Olympics since 1984. And, Tiger Woods, the length of his career. And so you don't pull punches as a journalist. You ask the question. I'm not a PR person. They have PR people. I'm not there to protect them. And I'm not there to do anything other than ask questions for the readers and the viewers. That's my responsibility, to get as much information as possible. That's what we do in journalism. So by asking that question, I've asked probably, oh my goodness, hundreds, maybe thousands of questions that are tougher or stronger or harsher, more controversial, especially of male athletes. And was the WNBA Players Association saying that women can't handle tough questions? That we somehow have to coddle them or be softer? Is that the message they're sending in 2024? Is that what they want to tell all the girls and boys who watch these players, that they're not up to the tough questions? Or I don't even think it was a tough question. It was a basic question, basic journalism 101. But if that's the message that the Players Association is sending, Joe, that they can't handle it, they don't want a question that Tiger Woods has been asked. I asked Tiger Woods about a doctor who had human growth hormone as assistant crossing the border at the Masters. So, it's a question. It's
A little harder, little
big
tougher of a
gold
question.
shine. And I asked Tiger about having that assistant crossing the border, getting arrested with human growth hormone. And that assistant worked with the doctor who Tiger Woods worked with. you've got to ask that question. But that you would say that would probably be tougher. Certainly not equating, performance enhancing drug use with what Dejanay Carrington said or did. Now she also had a chance to answer it. She did. And she said she, of course, did not intend to do it. And you asked again specifically, did you intend or did you not intend? Could you please walk us, tell us what happened? And she did. And then I followed up, and I know people are angry about that too. And someone said I felt racist. You know, again, no, it would feel like you're babying female athletes if you're not asking the questions, in my humble opinion. And that person who said that, Megan Rapinoe, I've known for a long time, and I've asked her tougher questions, and she's handled them. It's fascinating. It's certainly an interesting portrait of a time and place in women's sports that is certainly not where I thought we would be in terms of the strength and the character and the education and the ability of these. These are not damsels in distress. They can answer these questions. But I did follow up and saying you had several, again, millions of views of these videos with what looked like 3 to the dome. But they're also fingers. Are they going close to the eye? Marina Mabry, there's a lot of laughter and joking. Again, you ask the basic question, were you laughing about that? And you give the athlete the chance to hit it out of the park. How the WNBA did not prepare those players to understand that national scrutiny was coming in a way it never had before with the arrival of Caitlin Clark, I do not understand, but you're right. I deal with all of it in the
So
book.
so that's what I was gonna ask about next, was sort of how the league prepared them, right? And I think, look, we don't need to sort of hide away from this. There's certainly a racial element here. If you think about Caitlin Clark, she's a white player, most of the league is black. She has a boyfriend, a lot of the league is gay. And she comes in and she's making a lot of money. She gets this huge endorsement deal with Nike. Fans are coming out to see her play. There's certainly a level of jealousy there, whether certain players want to admit it or not. It's just human interaction, right? I think everyone can see that for what it is. So we get that. But part of this also feels like maybe the WNBA, the leadership, didn't prepare the players for sort of what they were going to go into, right? And the way I see it is, right, if you look at the leadership team from the commissioner all the way down, every time it seemed that Caitlin Clark was due to receive an award, due for recognition, her highlight or her statistics could have been highlighted, her play could have been highlighted. It always felt like they were sort of caveating it with another player, right? Whether it was Angel Reese or someone else, like they were almost backtracking in real time to not give her enough credit. So the other players felt like they were elevated as well, rather than saying, hey, look, we've seen for multiple years now what Caitlin Clark has done in Iowa, how many fans have shown up to see her play. This is going to happen in the WNBA. It's going to be great for everyone. We're going through a CBA negotiation right now. Everyone's going to make more money as a result of it. Here's how we need to deal with it. Here's how you should deal with reporters. What sense did you get that maybe the leadership of the WNBA could have done a better job than they did?
Yeah, well, you've just summarized a couple chapters in the book, and I'm glad you have because I deal with all of this. Again, it's an unauthorized biography of Caitlin Clark, and also this time in women's sports and where we are, Title IX and Iowa and everything that's happened. And it sounds ominous to say unauthorized, but to me, that's exactly what you want. It's no holds barred. Look at the entire situation. Caitlin will write her book someday, and it will smash all records. Although the unauthorized book about Caitlin Clark is #2 on the New York Times bestseller list. So, that's obviously the fascination with this country with Caitlin Clark. And I deal with all of it. I'll tell you an anecdote that's in the book, Joe, that I think really helps to crystallize the issue for the WNBA and their lack of preparation for the moment, lack of understanding of even what was coming. So, of course, we saw the barnstorming tour, especially her senior year, but also her junior year, and those TV ratings and the record number, 4 million more watching the women than watched the men's final the next night in the NCAA in April of 2024. And you see everyone standing outside in January and February in the cold outside of the University of Maryland or Ohio State or my alma mater, Northwestern, or, wherever, and Indiana University, and people waiting in line like it's a Springsteen concert or Taylor Swift concert, and they're waiting in line to watch a woman play basketball. I never thought we would see that. So Caitlin Clark announces for the draft, say she's going to leave Iowa and go into the draft. And the next day I called someone I know within the WNBA, a WNBA official. And I just, a friendly conversation. I said, do you realize how big this is? And this person, who I do not name in the book for obvious reasons, did not want to be quoted by name, but says, yeah, this is the biggest thing to happen to the WNBA since Maya Moore. And my next line in the book is, That was a surprising answer. Not because Maya Moore isn't great. Maya Moore is one of the great players of all time, right?
Yeah,
Four-time.
but 99% of American sports fans couldn't pick Maya Moore out of a lineup. I'm sorry, but it's true, right? Whereas with Caitlin Clark, they can. It's an entirely different category.
Right, so you understand immediately. Again, this is not a ripping Maya Moore at all. Amazing person, amazing human, and of course, the favorite player of young Caitlin Clark. So, I mean, Maya Moore, we all get it. This is not being critical of Maya Moore. She was tremendous. Never transcended the sport, never crossed over to the point where, like, people in the produce section of the grocery store are talking about Caitlin Clark's, next game time, and are you gonna watch? And people, not men especially, never watch women's basketball. Planning
Well,
their
I
evening.
was just gonna say, it feels like she might have even been like the first team sport athlete on the female side to really do what you just said, right? Which is like get men to rearrange their schedules. I know I did, right? Like when I knew that even in March Madness, her first game in Indiana, whatever it was, like I've rearranged my schedule on multiple times to go and watch her play. And we've seen it in individual sports, right? With the Olympics or other things like that. But I'm not sure that we ever really saw it with a team sport. Maybe I'm missing someone, but I know you talked about Title IX in your book. Do you think that was like the major, kind of like the biggest success story that we've seen so far of Title IX?
Yeah, oh, yeah, women's team sports for sure. You have the '99 Women's World Cup, which of course was happening and huge. But Caitlin Clark is so much bigger than that because it's night after night, city after city, and she's not wearing the red, white, and blue. She should have been. Olympic snub chapter handles all that, but she's not wearing, the national colors playing for a national team like the women's soccer team was, or even when they're at the Olympics. No, she's wearing the black and gold of Iowa and then the red and blue of and yellow of the Fever. And that's by far the first ever breakthrough team sport athlete. And that's where most American sports is, right? Your, Detroit Tigers against the Chicago White Sox. I mean, those are your city's teams. And for a women's team to finally break through, I mean, the Fever are like a men's major league team in terms of the interest, how much people care, the following, the ratings, everything about it. And that's the point about that Maya Moore quote. As I said, that official had no idea, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I use that quote in the book to just show the reader how unbelievably unprepared they either didn't. And I also in the book, it's journalism, as I said, 101. If I know it, if it's sourced, if I have it, it's in the book. If I don't, it's not in the book. You can trust everything is the journalism that I have been doing since the early 80s. And so same standards. And so I don't know what was in that person's head exactly, but I do know that it was either completely clueless about what was coming, or was it possible they never believed it would be happening because it never happened before? Because the male dominated mainstream sports media never gave these athletes their due. They never gave them that attention, whether they should have or not. I'm sure people watching will say, well, they weren't good enough. Okay, fine. Or they weren't interesting, or they weren't entertainers like Caitlin Clark, because that's the difference.
Well,
Caitlin
so,
is.
so part of the line, right, and is like there was tons of people when she was in college that said this won't follow to the WNBA, right? Like there was no shortage of opinions of people who thought that. They just said like this is a college thing. When she goes to the WNBA, no one's going to pay attention. It's going to die off. That clearly has not happened. But it's sort of this weird divide, right? Where there's the racial element, the jealousy, whatever it is. And in some way that might have helped everything because of the attention that it continued to bring, right? If you turn on ESPN, they're talking about her versus Angel Reese. They don't even play the same position. They don't guard each other during a game. But the fact that there's this rivalry of sorts, now people are interested in it. So I'm curious, like, there's two parts to this, right? Is in like I at first didn't really think that a lot of players hated her. I thought it was just kind of like, it's basketball, it's competition. Maybe there's some jealousy, whatever it is. I've sort of changed my opinion on that recently over the last 12 months or so with some of the things that have been said and done and continuously. But ultimately, there's also opportunity off of that, right? We've seen some of the players that have chosen to go play with her in Indiana, Sophie Cunningham, that has blown up on social media. Some of her other teammates that have blown up on social media because of their camaraderie, the ability to be around her, endorsement opportunities they've gotten because of that. What do you think is ultimately driving the growth of the WNBA? Is it sort of Caitlin by herself? Is it some of the other people playing antagonist and rivalry? Or is it just a growing interest in sort of women's basketball and Caitlin has added fuel to something that was already growing?
Yeah, and of course, we do need to mention, and again, and you asked this a couple of questions ago, it's a 74% Black league. I have a whole chapter, A League of Their Own, it's called, about the WNBA. I covered it in the 90s. I know there seem to be people out there that I've heard that say, oh, you just like arrived. do the 90s not count as
Well, that's why I actually knew that, and that's why it was funny when the whole Carrington thing was going down because people were making it seem like you were like a new reporter that was basically just there to write a Caitlin Clark story, a Caitlin Clark book, and we're asking pointed questions for the book. When in reality, you had been covering the league probably longer than any other media member that was there at the time, right? So,
probably?
and
And
you had seen the league grow over time and evolve and do these different things. So, I would argue that you were probably the best person to talk on it rather than just someone
yeah.
who was writing a book.
Well, and also, I mean, so many things here, but it's laughable. People are upset that there's a book being written on Caitlin Clark. I mean, I'm surprised there aren't 10 books written on Caitlin Clark. I've covered, as I said, Tiger Woods the length of his career. I'd be in a scrum with around Tiger or at a press, where he's at the lectern. And the guy on my right's writing a book on Tiger, and the guy on my left's writing a book about Tiger at that point. And then next year there might be two. Like, when did this become a thing? It's so strange. And now that you see the success of this book, and also the people really seem to like it, and it's gotten good reviews, like, you're telling me you shouldn't tell this incredible story. Caitlin Clark is not just, as you know, Joe, is not just one of our most famous athletes in the country. She's one of the most famous people in the country.
Yeah.
And so a journalist who's covered sports all these years wouldn't do that. I mean, it's just outright laughable and so bizarre. And some of these people are people I've mentored or helped or done their shows over the years, standing on my head at the Olympics. And of course, I do that again for them anytime because that's who I am. And I want to encourage women and men in the business, as everyone knows I do that. And I've always wanted that to be one of the biggest things I do. But truly remarkable in the sense of, I guess, just maybe the minor league feeling of the whole thing, that keeping the small things small. I don't say that in the book, but I was tempted almost to say that in the book. And then I decided not to use that line. I don't know why. I just read in quickly, but I'm happy to say it on the book tour and talk to you. Like, is the idea to just have the WNBA be this smaller thing? Gino Ariema, right? Gino calls them delusional fans. I talked to Gino after that. I said, well, first of all, aren't all fans delusional? Isn't that kind of part of the definition of fandom? And secondly, since when has someone said we don't want fans? Like, I mean, the WNBA has been waiting for this moment. My coverage going back to the 96 Olympics in LA or in Atlanta. That's the genesis. That's where it was launched, reporting for NPR as well as my newspaper reporting. And then, of course, even on CNN, where I'm talking about during the bubble, when the anchors want to talk about the NBA's activism, right? You've got the murder of George Floyd. Well, little old me, not looking for a pat on the back. I'm just telling the facts here. I then go, yes, about the NBA, but let's look at what the WNBA is doing. They're actually doing more. That has been a voice that I have been as a journalist covering this and wanting to make sure that the WNBA gets its due when so much of many of my colleagues didn't want to do that. And so again, of course I'm going to write a book, and that's what journalists do, but it is a 74% Black league and a white woman entering it. And how on earth the WNBA didn't look at our very polarized society, right? We've got a presidential election going on, and say this, and here's the voices. It's not me talking. I've got the great Dr. Harry Edwards, civil rights leader, wonderful scholar, sociologist, a Black man who was the impetus behind the 1968 Mexico City Black Power salute. Dr. Harry Edwards is in the book, quite a few quotes on this exact topic, where he says the WNBA failed the players. His voice, not mine. And he loves Caitlin Clark. He says you've got to prepare them. You have Zooms, you have conversations, not because they're needy damsels in distress, as I said, whatever. No, it's because they've never seen anything like this before, Joe. This is so unusual and so different. I think you can absolutely say for a fact that no league, tour, entity, sports circuit has ever had anyone more important than Caitlin Clark is to the WNBA. Because Tiger Woods was taking a golf tour that had already had Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus, bringing it up. But no, the WNBA never had reached that point of like cultural acceptance and sports acceptance, the way that men's golf or NBA pre-Jordan or pre-Bird and Magic. Anyway, that's it. And then Brianna Scurry, the goalkeeper of the 1999 women's soccer team, the first Black superstar of that team, I quote her, and she's again talking about, it's a tsunami coming and don't mess it up. Don't blow this, and she's talking about the veteran players, majority of whom are Black. So those voices for me in on her game are very important. I'm honored to quote them. They're two wonderful people, and they tell a big part of the story of the failure of the WNBA.
I would love to hear about two topics specifically and just what you learned while writing this book about them. Number one is the chartered flights. When she came into the league, the WNBA obviously started rolling out chartered flights. Hopefully, that will be embedded in the next CBA as they continue to negotiate and expand that program permanently. But I'd love to hear just sort of if Caitlin Clark was the main impetus behind that decision, what you learned while reporting and writing on that. And then number two, more about the Olympic snub. Obviously, that was a big deal when that happened.
Absolutely. So the charter flights, yes, I do tell the entire backstory of the charter flights, and it is weird. It is weird. It's still weird to me, Joe.
In what way?
Yeah. So I was watching, as I think a lot of people were, when Caitlin Clark, one of the most famous athletes and people in the country, was flying commercially to her first game, which was the preseason game in Dallas in early May. And this would be the first time she's flown commercially in years because, of course, due to Title IX and this incredible support of women's basketball in college, they all fly charters. So now you've got the WNBA flying someone, with the NBA ever tell LeBron to go through, go back to the back of, and get in coach or even in first class would he go through TSA pre-check? I mean, would Patrick Mahomes, would Tom Brady, okay, you get back there in row 30. You're right. I mean, so that's what I'm watching. And as I saw, and I'm sure a lot of people saw, there were various videos of Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston and their teammates going through baggage claim at Dallas DFW. And they've got one Fever security person with them nearby, and then the other kind of bringing up the rear. And I'm watching this, and you can see the guys filming in the background of the videos. And I just thought, well, this is just absolutely outrageous. I mean, they're being treated like animals at the zoo, right? There for America's viewing for anyone, because it's no longer security, it's baggage claim. And Dallas is an open carry, Texas is open carry. And I mean, who knows what could happen? How about a troop of Girl Scouts come running over and someone trips and falls on Caitlin's ankle? I mean, anything either nefarious or just, kind of unfortunate could happen. Okay. So Cathy Engelbert had been asked at the draft, nope, no charter flights. Don't have the money, no charter flights. So we're going to do back-to-back. They were chartering and then the playoffs as they had been doing, but no day-to-day charter flights for the WNBA. So I am, as a columnist for USA Today, I was thinking I'll write a column on this, obviously blasting it because it's just absolutely outrageous. And it's not, by the way, it's Caitlin, yes, first and foremost, because she is by far the most famous and no one else. You said the mentioning of Caitlin and Angel or Cathy Engelbert's inability to say Caitlin Clark for 27 minutes before the first playoff game where I'm did not get banned. Of course, I had a credential. And Cathy Engelbert is talking all about the record attendance, record TV ratings, moving to bigger arenas, all of which happened for one reason, Caitlin Clark, and she cannot say the name Caitlin Clark in 27 minutes. That's all in the book. And then I asked Cathy Engelbert about it. She finally talked to me about that. She refused to talk to me for anything else, which is, again, it's fine. It's her right.
What did she have to say about that?
She said she mentioned, she said, I only mentioned players who were in the game that night. In other words, the Minnesota Lynx and the New York Liberty. And of course, I was listening. I also had it audio taped. And of course, there's a transcript. I had all of that. This is March, near the very end of this book that we were getting done so quickly. And of course, I knew that she had mentioned Aaliyah Boston and Asia Wilson. So I sent back to the person sending me her quotes. I said, thank you for the quote, but she's wrong. She did mention two people who were not in the game that night, Asia Wilson and Aaliyah Boston. And then that person just blew up, obviously, and realized that they had, then I said, let's talk about it. They wouldn't talk about it. To be a journalist at that point, I probably, if they'd wanted to say, hey, we screwed up, could we take that out? I might have even done that. But they wanted to, I guess they're either so afraid of the book or afraid of me, although I'm certainly not the enemy. They wanted to make me the enemy, maybe. Joe, I have no idea. You can ask them. I'd love to hear why they did what they did. But instead of probably as a courtesy, I would have taken that mistake out that Cathy Engelbert made. They just became very belligerent. And so at that point, of course, I kept it in because they didn't want to talk to me anymore. So the mistakes even were little things like that. I mean, that's just, you pick up the phone, you call a journalist you've known for a long time and you say, hey, we just screwed up. But they didn't even do that. So truly amateur hour. I must admit, in all the things I've covered, I don't know if I've ever seen more minor league, kind of just silliness than I saw in covering the WNBA. And it makes me, it doesn't give me any joy at all. Makes me, I mean, journalistically, you do what you do. As a human being, it's like, really? This great moment? This is what everyone's been waiting for? I didn't think I'd see this in my lifetime. A
I
woman being
wanna I wanna get back to the other one, but I have a quick aside from that. Did you get any, context from how NBA owners felt about everything that was going on, right? Because the NBA, a lot of NBA owners own WNBA teams. There's kind of a disproportionate amount that cross over, but also the NBA has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the WNBA over the last, 25, 30 years. Has there been did you get any feeling as you were kind of reporting for this book about whether there was any animosity from NBA owners that felt like it was getting screwed up in any sense?
Um, I certainly was talking with NBA people. Um, I'd say the opposite. They were complicit in these, and we'll get back to the charter flights. That they were, I mean, in both cases, I was dealing with someone in the NBA, the one with the Cathy Engelbert 27 minutes where she just got it completely wrong on her answer about,
Yeah.
yeah, that she did mention tune. I mean, how can you put that out? How is someone not checking it? How I just
Yeah, for
astonished.
people that don't know, the 2 leagues are essentially intertwined, right? So, the PR person for Kathy may have an NBA email address, right? And vice versa. So, it's not surprising that go ahead.
Yeah, and then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off on your own on your own
No, no,
podcast,
go ahead.
sorry.
Go ahead.
But going back to the charter, I think it will help to answer the question.
Yeah.
So I'm dealing with someone at the NBA. I went
Mhm.
so what happens is now I'm watching the videos and I'm seeing this scene, and I thought I'm gonna write a column really criticizing the WNBA and the NBA for not being ready with charter flights based on this awful, very unpleasant and unsettling tableau that I'm seeing on video at the Dallas Fort Worth baggage claim. Okay. So, but often what I will do, and I try to do all the time, the reason I've been here and doing this for all these years and still doing it is because it's always a two-way street with me and I always want to talk to people. And which makes all the WNBA's behavior here for this book even stranger. And it's too bad. I mean, it's their call, of course. It's, they can do whatever they want. So they did. But I then decided to call someone, in this case in the NBA, to just run this by them and say, like, I really find you're playing with fire here. What if Caitlin Clark were to have someone rush her? And of course, Brittany Griner had this happen in the Dallas Fort Worth airport in the concourse after she came back from that terrible imprisonment by Vladimir Putin and his his Russian police force. And so we'd already seen it, and of course, the WNBA should have had probably figured out right then to have charter flights. They did give charter opportunities for Brittany Griner, but for everybody else, I mean, a 6'9" Black woman walking through airports after being in the news to the extent she was for being in prison in Russia. I mean, how are you not prepared for that before there's an incident? So that was terrible, and I was critical about that on various TV shows. Okay, so now move ahead and also praise the WNBA for working hard to get Brittany Griner out. All that's in the book for people who don't think I was covering it before, a few minutes ago. So then I'm talking to this person and I said, and I was being very honest about the column I was going to write. But I said, here, give me feedback. What am I missing? What am I missing? And when I picked up that phone on a Friday afternoon in early May of 2024, there were no charter flights. That was a fact. There were no charter flights, no way, no how. And so as we talked for 45 minutes. Again, all this is in that chapter on this. Then that I was, we're getting to the end of it, and this person says, "Would you mind not writing, over the weekend? I might have more information for you on Monday." And it was, it's getting to be the weekend, and it's okay. Yes, and they're giving me more charter or more commercial flights. I can see what happens with Angel Reese, which is also equally potentially fraught with trouble, and any number of other players and other teams. So sure, I'll watch things happen over the next couple of days. Monday, when I do hear back from this same source, I am told something that literally not much shocks me anymore, but it did shock me, that the WNBA was going to be having charter flights for everyone starting as soon as possible, and I could break the news on Tuesday. So I do not take it I tell that story in the book exactly like that. I have no idea why they didn't have charter flights on Friday. Adamantly, no way, no how, before a journalist picked up the phone and asked some questions, and then had charter flights on Monday, and that same journalist was going to be able to break the news. I am not saying it was my question. I am not saying, but what the heck happened? And here's the thing, going back to the NBA, your question a few minutes ago. I mean, is this just blatant misogyny and sexism that, like, they didn't think of it? You're the big brother NBA. You own 60% of the WNBA, either individual owners or the league owns. And you haven't even thought, maybe they didn't think Caitlin Clark was that big a deal either. Maybe they're all part of the same cluelessness. But whatever it was, that's the true story. It happened, and it's stunning. And it still actually stuns me, Joe, that happened that way. And it shows again the utter lack of preparation, not only the WNBA, but the NBA, when the greatest thing that's ever happened, not the greatest player, certainly not now, maybe not ever, but the greatest thing, the attention magnet, spotlights on her that finally shines on all those other players, most of them Black, who deserved it and never got it. And now they're getting it. And the most important thing, and this is how they're looking at her as she's coming into the league, unbelievable, but definitely, as I said, all true.
Yeah, it's weird because you would assume that they would be doing everything they can from the NBA perspective to really do this thing right because they've invested so much money in the league. And I mean, they didn't even carve out the WNBA media rights, right? When the NBA went into their last media rights deal, the WNBA rights were still included. And you know this, but for people who don't, those rights were always included because one, they probably couldn't have sold for nearly as much on their own, but two, it was an asset for the NBA to go to TV broadcasters and say, look, we're a year-round sports enterprise where the WNBA plays when there's not NBA games and the NBA plays when the WNBA doesn't have games. So it really gave them total coverage year-round, and they did that again on this last deal when the WNBA probably could have gone out on their own and got their own deal. The NBA said, hey, we've done this for 25 years this way. Let's continue doing it this way because this time it was especially advantageous for them. So I'm surprised to hear that, but also at the same time, maybe not. Let's cover one last thing though, Christine. Let's talk about the Olympics stuff.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So for sure, the Olympics, obviously this is an area of expertise for me. I've covered every Olympics since '84 in LA and so honored, lucky to get a chance to do that. And certainly covered a ton of Olympic team selection decisions, and whether it's, swimming, which is basic, you touch the wall, you make the team, although then they pick people for the relays. Track and field, again, mostly just who hits the tape first, and then relays and other decisions. And also gymnastics and other teams that have just literally kind of thrown together, and they get to pick whoever they want. So obviously the women's basketball issue was a big one. And I first wrote about it. I started reporting on it back in January and February. And with my sources, I was already hearing something that really surprised me. I never met Caitlin Clark, never covered any games. I went to one game. Our family went. We bought tickets, didn't sit in press row, just wanted to experience it among the other spectators. And so I didn't know her at all. But I was watching this happen, as I said, and realizing this moment was so huge. And of course, why on earth wouldn't you have Caitlin Clark on the Olympic team, especially because often they will take a collegian as a nod to the NCAA and collegiate athletes, including Rebecca Lobo and Brianna Stewart and Diana Taurasi, and of course, Christian Laettner on the men's side, infamously. And so as I started to ask questions about this, Joe, I was hearing, I'm not sure, maybe not. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why wouldn't you do this? This is the greatest scorer in Division I NCAA history, male or female. And also, again, we'll bring eyeballs that this team has never gotten. And let me explain that for a moment. Because I've covered so many Olympic gold medal games, the women's team, at least 5 or 6 out of the 10 Olympics, Summer Olympics I've covered. And they have been to those games and watched basically it's tumbleweeds in the press tribune. There's an AP reporter and maybe Bob Ryan and Jackie McMullen, and we chat and say hi, a few other journalists, but it's mostly empty. Why is it mostly empty? I know some people wonder if it's racism. Actually, in this case, I would say, although racism is a huge part of our world, of course, in many ways, but no, this is a team that hadn't lost since the 1992 Olympic Games. So sports editors who've got 2 people at the Olympics or 1 person at the Olympics, and they need to make sure to cover the rowing and the gold medal for team handball and the local person in the gymnastics balance beam or whatever it might be. they just would decide, hey, we can have a wire service cover this. U.S. is going to win. We don't need to cover it. It's not anything other than having the number of people and the fact that the team just never would lose. The women's soccer also happens around the same time, the gold medal match, and the women's soccer does lose. U.S. women's soccer loses, and so it's can be a much more competitive match. Anyway, that's what happens. You bring Caitlin Clark, and all of a sudden, every journalist comes running to cover her and then covers all those players who deserve the attention that they've never gotten it. Something
Yeah,
else.
that was sort of the whole debate, right? Was like half the country was essentially saying, "Oh, they don't need her to win," and the other half was saying, "That's the point, right? Like you could have brought the B team and still won, but if you bring her, it brings a bunch more eyeballs and it makes the games more important."
Right. And of course, growing the game is a part of the USA basketball mission statement, of course, to grow the game. And of
Mhm.
course, why is the NHL, why do they stop in February? Because they want that global platform. Why does the NFL go to Europe? Or why does MLB start out in Japan? You want to reach the masses. So the USA basketball literally chose not to do that. Said, Caitlin Clark, we do not want you on our team. Also, for those that would say, well, okay, you don't pick her just to be Johnny Appleseed planting the seeds around the world for basketball, even though certainly make that case, but her statistics were better than Diana Taurasi's. And anyone who knows, and you have Dawn Staley, who was on the committee, and she said on NBC, of course, I quote her in the book because I go into every detail of this. Anyone who wants to relive it all or have your heart rate go up, this will be the way it happens. But you know, Dawn Staley says at NBC, tells Mike Tirico at the Olympics, "Oh, she's playing so much better, and she's head and shoulders above everybody now." Well, these are the best basketball minds, including Dawn Staley, in the country. On the night that I broke the news, someone read me the list that Caitlin Clark was not on the Olympic team, which was June 7th. She had just had 30 points and 7 threes against Washington in an amazing game. Now, clearly, they'd already made the decision because I then had someone read me the list a few hours later. But she was already playing great. She was being blitzed. She was being picked up full court. She clearly was getting the most attention defensively of any player in the league, which would then tell you how important she was already. How did these basketball minds not see that? And bottom line on this is they did not want her on the team. There was either a sense that she needs to wait her turn. They wanted to give Diana Taurasi the going away present. Name another time when you would ever give an athlete a going away present with an Olympic berth. Outrageous, absolutely outrageous. Again,
Yeah.
haven't covered this since '84.
Yeah,
And
and if you mentioned that Diana Taurasi shouldn't have been on the team, it was like the biggest deal in the world. Like you were offending WNBA fans, which any like objective sports fan would have told you that exact same thing that you said, right? Which is like you bring the young talent that's transcending the game and going to make it global versus the older player who's not really going to play all that much is really just going there from a ceremonial perspective.
well, exactly. And of course, this allowed me to write this sentence in the book. And you know, it's true. Diana Taurasi and Caitlin Clark both played the same number of minutes and scored the same number of points in the gold medal game, which was ragged, a 1-point victory for the U.S. over France. 0 and 0. One of them, Diana Taurasi, was sitting on the bench in Paris. The other was 4,000 miles away in the United States.
Yeah.
I had a journalist from Brazil come running up to me early on and said, "Where is Caitlin Clark?" And I said, "They left her at home." And this woman said, "I was going to cover every U.S. game and send all the news back to Brazil and all the videos because everyone loves Caitlin Clark in Brazil. And now she said, I will not cover any U.S. game because she had the Olympics is like 30 events a day. You don't,
Yeah.
you know, it's just not, you're waiting around for one event. I mean, everyone is running all over and you can't usually get to 2 or 3. You can maybe do 2, but very rarely can you do 3 things or 4 things a day and get to another game. So, and then a British journalist who asked me to explain everything said he was going to cover every day game again. And so that's what USA basketball just frittered away at the key moment when you want to grow the game with someone who, by the way, 3-point shooting in the Olympics, big deal. John Thompson knows that from 1988 in Seoul. I was there, and the U.S. lost that gold medal, which then precipitated the Dream Team 4 years later in men's basketball for the U.S. And so you could have, especially with the way they were playing in that game, you bring in Caitlin Clark for a couple threes and give them a shot in the arm. It was a disastrous decision. It looks worse today than it looked a year ago. Cheryl Reeves' behavior, obviously the Olympic coach who's not on the committee, but she's the one that was tweeting at and focusing on, here's a 50-something-year-old woman focusing on a 22-year-old woman, blaming her for not having a game on TV because Caitlin Clark, is only getting the attention for preseason games. I mean, just absolutely outrageous behavior by a woman who should be leading and not focusing and not even targeting, if you were whatever the right word is about the tweets. A 22-year-old who's only looking up to all these players. Same with Taurasi. I mean, their behavior was awful.
Well, that's been the weird thing to me, and I'm curious. I want to be respectful of your time, but lastly, I'm just curious about what you learned about Caitlin Clark, right? Because as you mentioned, this was an unauthorized biography. I'm sure you talked to her a number of times through press rooms and other interviews and opportunities like that. But you obviously also got to know family, friends, associates, people that have interacted with her, and I'm sure you left with a best better understanding of who she is as a person, right? And I'm curious because she's gone through all of this stuff, right? And from the outside looking in, I don't know her. I've never had an interaction with her, but it seems like not only is she very mature for her age, for sure, but she often takes the high road and is also very careful about. I don't know if careful around her brand is the right word, but she stays out of sort of thorny issues that maybe some other people would get kind of lumped into. What was just your kind of feeling and your analysis of who she was as a person as you got to know her and the people around her?
Absolutely, you nailed it. You just nailed it. I asked her 40 to 50 questions, usually in small press availabilities. I did have opportunity to meet her, talk to her one-on-one, but that was before I even had a book deal. This all happened very quickly with Scribner in July, just a little bit over a year ago. So, and I got added access to practices, exclusive access to some practices. And you're right, I spent a half hour talking to Kate Martin all about Caitlin, and a lot of it taking the high road. Great quote from Kate Martin during the chapter called Hip Check, in which you can guess what that's about, Kennedy Carter and that fiasco and how everyone behaved and Caitlin's ability just to rise above it. And 2 minutes after she's gets this cheap shot, makes the free throw that ends up being the margin of victory in the game, but then also does a live ABC interview where she could have just laid into
Yeah.
everybody. WNBA is so fortunate that she is one of those people that takes the high road and just so mature, 22 going on 40 or 50, I say in the book. She has the tantrums, and I talk to her, occasionally gets upset, obviously, in the court and gets those technical fouls. Talk to her about that. What were you thinking? And she's, oh, too much, too much. That exchange is in the book. Um, she is remarkably poised. The WNBA is so lucky that this is her personality because the way she could have unloaded on people if she'd wanted to, the way Kennedy Carter unloaded on her so ridiculously and incorrectly. What else did she do other than threes? As Caitlin was like leading in categories left and right. Just the immaturity and the anger, and as Muffet McGraw says, petty jealousy that she saw that is in the book as well. Even the Olympic snub, going back to that. So Caitlin said, "Hey, it's okay." And in interviews, she said, it's all right. I'll make it the next time. Well, in the book, I have a wonderful anecdote from then the head coach, Christy Sides. And she told me that she found out, they landed back in Indy from Washington, and she and Caitlin walked as they got off the plane, walked and talked. And she said Caitlin was incredibly disappointed. And Christy Sides said that Caitlin was just so energized. That's when Sides had also said, it's like, coach, they woke a monster. Well, that she said Caitlin could have gone. It was probably 1 a.m, could gone and practiced right then. So Caitlin was very disappointed. And that's in the book. But again, to her great credit, she takes the high road personally and says it's okay. And that's the class. And that's what the WNBA has. And how lucky, and I'm saying lucky as a journalist watching it, because if Caitlin Clark had it with some of this behavior, or if she had had it with Marina Mabrey steamrolling her like a freight train and didn't just walk away and didn't handle, all of this controversy well, my goodness, it would be a even bigger national controversy than what it often can be when these things flare up, because she works very hard to tamp it down. And that's because I think that, Joe, that she is as appreciative, publicly appreciative an athlete as I have ever seen in all of my years covering sports, thousands and thousands of athletes. And she's someone who is so real and so honest and spends time. Most athletes, Caitlin talked 3 times a day, shoot around before and after a game for a while until they just went to 2 times a game. Most athletes don't talk 3 times a week. Some won't talk 3 times a year. And she was just being interviewed and was always available. And even now she is, even with these injuries. And so, again, I think that it's to her great credit and to the WNBA's credit that this is the personality of this superstar, this first huge transcendent cultural star in women's basketball. And obviously, we'll see how it plays out. But what a delight for me to chronicle the story and put it in context with Title IX and the growth of women's sports in general. And you're absolutely right. We've liked basically it's individual athletes from the Olympics: Serena Williams, tennis; Venus Williams, Billie Jean King, Chris Evert, Katie Ledecky, Simone Biles. I talk all about that. Finally, here's that team sport athlete. And, it's that kind of like the girl next door with Title IX all grown up. Country's fallen in love with what we've created because of Title IX, 53 years. And here she is, America, Caitlin Clark.
Yeah, amazing when you put it in that context. Well, Chrissy, I'm so happy for your success with the book. I know part of it is picking a great topic, but also part of it is writing an incredible book with access and quotes and different things like that. So, congratulations on the success so far. For anyone who wants to buy the book and check it out, it's called On Her Game: Caitlin Clark and the Revolution in Women's Sports. I assume you can buy it on Amazon, Target, Walmart, Barnes and Nobles, wherever you want to get your books. Just Google it online; you'll be able to find it. Christine, thank you so much for doing this today.
Joe, it's really my pleasure. Thank you.